Leandra and I have been so overwhelmed and excited to see the growth of the Magick Kitchen podcast. We have had over 80,000 listens in the lifetime of the podcast, and we had 8,000 downloads just this month. So we decided it is time to invite you further into the Magick Kitchen. For the first time ever, we will be recording kitchen table talks, videos recorded together that dive into topics that you vote on. We're creating a resource library called the Magick Kitchen Pantry, where you can access our courses and our table talks, which we'll be uploading bi-monthly.
And as it grows, we want your involvement to shape this community. We'd love to start hosting live workshops, Q&As, body doubling, book clubs, and more. Join us at the launch party on November 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, when we will officially open the community. Join us in the free space or gain full access to the courses and videos by becoming a member. Early birds get 50% off until November 15th. We're so excited for you to join us in the Magick Kitchen.
The link in the description below. Leandra and I hope you really enjoyed part 1 of our interview with Amy Blackthorn last time on the Magick Kitchen podcast. Today, we're bringing you part 2, and I wanted to give a little content warning, a little trigger warning for people who might not enjoy hearing about stalking, SA, or trauma. If that's too much for you to listen to, then you might want to skip this episode, but I wanted to let you know that up front in case you might be uncomfortable. Blessed Samhain, and thanks for listening.
I'm Leandra Witchwood.
And I'm Elyse Welles.
And welcome to the Magick Kitchen Podcast, where we talk about magic, kitchen witchcraft, herbs,
and everything in between.
We are rebels. Together, enter the chamber of the heart where your spirit yearns to be reborn. Ignite that spark, fan that glowing flame, and warm yourself to your core with meaningful conversations, thundering heartbeats, countless dreams, inspiring stories, ecstatic devotion, healing ceremonies, and excursions into the wilds of the soul. Join me, Leandra Witchwood, in the Rebel Mystic community as we come together and explore the radical, rebellious act of creating sisterhood and engaging in deep self-care. When you're teaching people to develop their personal intuitive abilities and learning to recognize their own guides' messages, what are your thoughts on their own personal trauma or ego stepping in to disrupt those messages?
It's absolutely a thing. It's so hard when you're first going through this. You're like, is this really a thing, or is this something I think is a thing because trauma? And my favorite way to tell that little I'm getting goosebumps. My favorite way to tell is that if the information surprises you. That's my favorite litmus test for all things intuitive, especially I lead a workshop on intuiting and understanding previous lifetimes. And if you just close your eyes and you're like, I go to the market and it's great and everybody loves me and I get a fish and then I cook it and everybody loves it and it's made and the end. Like, you're telling yourself a story. And if that's what you want, like, congratulations, here's some time to meditate on the story you're telling yourself. I was Joan of Arc and it was so sad, but whatever it is, that's your business. But if you're going into an intuitive space, if you're embodying this meditation, you're having some guided imagery work, if the information surprises you, that's a good litmus test for whether this is something that's intuitively coming through, or this is my trauma saying, hey, like, let's put some brakes in because I'm scared. That is a great litmus test. Is if it's going to surprise you, there's a better chance that this is something that is real and yours and not just, fun and cute.
Yeah. And I've run into a lot of like people tell themselves these stories like, oh, I was, this princess, or, they try to soothe themselves with the stories, and that makes sense. And so you guys were talking about like how the messages come through. Like me, it's usually audio. I'll get like one line. Like my most recent one was "Follow the white serpent," and I'm like, what the hell does that mean? So that's when I start digging into it. But you get these surprising messages that make no sense. Like of course, my snarkiness in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, does that mean White Snake is touring? Like, do I need to go on tour with them? Silly stuff like that. But that's my like snarky comeback to my guides. But I find my guides have a sense of humor, and getting to know them is really key. But yeah, the whole trauma aspect of it, trying to soothe ourselves with our visions, because sometimes they're terrifying. Sometimes they're very scary. If somebody got that who was terrified of snakes, like, why would they want to follow that? Why would they want to like dig deeper into that kind of a message? And for some people, yeah, it can be very difficult to accept the ability and to explore that ability when they're terrified of it.
There's a really good illustration for that. I was leading the past life workshop, and the one of the people who has attended this event, she's saying, I've been haunted by this sound my entire life, and I would really like to know why this completely innocuous sound sends me into fits of terror. Not just, all it's that I'm a little uncomfortable and I'm scared. She's terrified of the sound, and it's an innocuous everyday noise. And I'm like, okay, let's see if something comes up. I just want you to know that we're here in this room and you're completely safe. Somebody tries to come through the door, they'll have to deal with me. Like, you're safe here. And I meant it. So we go through this. We start the way that I do that workshop. We go in usually 3 sets of journeys, because the first time you're nervous and you're fidgety, and you're waiting to see what other people are going to see. You're going to wait and listen and see what I'm talking about. Like, you don't allow yourself to be present fully for the very first one, because it's a little nervy. So we go back a second time. We'll go back a third time, and 2 to 3 visits will take 2 hours. And it feels like 5 minutes, but it's really about 2 hours. And so I'm watching her start, you'll see people's toes, they'll fidget and try and keep themselves in their bodies because they're nervous or they're anxious. And so I see her calm down. And I start to see her tensing up. So we go back to our relaxation talking, and we go through the actual journey part that we're actually looking at where we are and who we're with. And you can see tears start to roll down her face. There's a content warning for the world being an awful place. The sound was boots on wooden floors.
Oh, man.
And she was a child.
Oh.
Who had to deal with what then transpired.
Mm-hmm.
And so we come back, and the rule is nobody gets to tell you have to share. That's not, I'll throw your hands up before I let somebody pressure you into sharing something. It's very personal and very often more traumatic than we give it credit for.
Yes.
So she starts to talk about this experience that she had while in trance. And the whole room is like sobbing for this woman and the things that happened during her trance. And it made all the sense in the world to her post journey, but it's not something that happened in this life. It's not something that she was able to point to happening now. It happened, 100 years ago. But it was so visual and so embodied in the way that we do that trance work, that she just broke down. She was looking for physical comfort. This was pre-pandemic, so I was comfortable giving her a hug. And people think that this is some fun, like, let's find out if I'm Cleopatra junk. And it's like, no, this is This is real soul work.
Yes.
And it can be gut wrenching.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me while I grab a tissue.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's definitely a thing.
Mm. This is why we share what we know.
Yeah. Now, someone could have told her, oh, that's bunk, and you're sad about nothing. Or you can listen to her experience and understand that this was absolutely real in that moment for her. She was in that body. She was there. So I always give a mini lecture before we start the things to expect that evening or later that day. One, you're going to be ravenous by the time we're done. It feels like 5 minutes, but it's 2 hours. And that's 2 hours of a lot of work. Even though we're sitting here and listening to the soft drums and me talking to you really gently, that's a lot of work, like capital W work. You're not throwing cinder blocks in the back of a truck, but there's a lot of work there. So your dreams are going to be completely whacked because you spent enough time. We're spending 2 hours in trance, which is actually a lot if you think about it. And especially for beginners, that's the most they've ever had ever.
It's a lot. Yeah.
So they know that they're going to be hungry. They know that they're going to have weird dreams. They know to
thirsty,
take some extra time be gentle with yourself, because it's hard and emotional work, and you're going to see things and you're going to feel things. And not all of that is fun. Not all of that is, wholesome and warm and something. It's not even something you can share a lot of times. I would not dishonor her sharing by sharing that out, the specific things that we talked about, but that level of connection outside of yourself is gut wrenching. And to have that be within yourself where you can't escape it so much that it's something that you've already experienced. It's not like someone's telling you that this happened to you in another lifetime. It doesn't have that connection anymore. But when you are sitting there, you're in that person's body, you're experiencing those fears and those anxieties. That is happening right now. It doesn't matter that it already occurred 100 years ago. It's happening right now. Yeah. So be gentle with yourself and take care of who you are. And sometimes that means different things. I've had people ask if in areas where marijuana is legal, if it's okay if they partake after their trance work. That's been kind of a lot. Absolutely. You're in a little bit of a better space to enjoy some herbal refreshment. If that looks like skull cap tea and your night jammies, awesome. If that looks like some tincture in your tea, that's also a thing. But making sure that you understand where your person is at, where your body is at. Because sometimes, especially after trance, you feel like those two people, like the person inside the body and the body itself. But making those two get back on speaking terms after a journey like that can be interesting, which I make sure everybody wiggles their wiggleables after you come back.
Come back.
Be back in your body. Mm-hmm. But it's so intense that they really need to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
Do you wish you had a piece of Greece? Get a handwritten Yule card and bookmark with a Greek goddess or temple on it when you join my Patreon community by December 1st. My Spirit First community is growing, and so are the benefits. Get full moon rituals, weekly journal prompts, exclusive articles, and now, for the first time, enjoy free access to my courses, as well as exclusive meditations and other witchy videos at patreon.com/Elyse Welles, or follow the link in the description below. So my YouTube channel, Seeking Numina, is about seeking spiritual places. And when I moved to Greece last year, that was why. My guides were like, hey, guess what? You need to live somewhere more spiritual than Park Heights, Baltimore. So you can
represent,
love it, but yeah, my guides were like, look, there's a little bit of a less chaotic environment you need to be in for the start of this next. Actually, I didn't even realize it had a name at the time, but like this Saturn return, my Saturn return is happening right now. So I'm glad I listened, because it's nicer to be in this more calm environment. But this spirit of place is something that I've always realized unconsciously as I would be drawn back to places again and again. And the most spiritual place I've ever been to in the United States is Delaware, where you live. Winterthur, specifically, that estate and grounds. I like Longwood a lot, but Winterthur there's something in those woods in particular.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then when I found out you live in Delaware, I was like, oh my gosh, like, because that's like number one. If I could right now, like, I would be buying another house there. I would spend fall and winter in Delaware and then spend the warmer months here in Greece. Like, that's the dream for me. So what drew you there? Like, did you feel that too? Like that spirit of place?
It's definitely part of it. Because I was born and raised in Baltimore. By the time I hit high school, I was moving further away from Baltimore every time I graduated, a different sphere of life. It's when I looked at the places that were ready, and by ready, I mean like the area was ready for me, not necessarily a house was ready for me. It was so important. I was still looking in Maryland at the time. I'm like, the pieces and the parts. Every time I looked at a place, there was just this sinking in my heart. Like, this isn't the right place. This doesn't have the right feeling. And something really cruddy happened. Like I said, I was, in my 20s and had these cute little witchy bumper stickers on my car. Well, I had gone to whoever was the first person on Google popped up and said realtor. And so this woman, we followed her from house to house, seeing 2 or 3 houses at a time. But we'd always followed her to wherever we were going, because I don't know where we're going. She does. Until the very last house, that very last day, I backed out and went on my way, and she backed out and went on her way, which meant she was behind me in her car, in my car. So she sees my little witch's heel bumper sticker and calls me on my cell phone to say, I can't help you, find another realtor, click. Hands down, like, bam, drop it like a hot potato.
Wow.
And so I'm like, that's a bunch of crap. So instead, I'm like, okay, well, if realtors are sucky, like, one doesn't make a whole batch not great. But again, it's that feeling of, okay, well, I guess that was a bust. I started looking on the Delaware side of the line because I wanted to make sure that if I moved to Delaware, I wanted to make sure that people were a little bit more open-minded than the previous places I was looking. And so as soon as I crossed over the state line into Delaware, I stopped having that sinking, pulled down in my heart feeling and started having the uplifting, warm, accepting feeling. Just from 50 feet's different. It's a different of this imaginary line. Everything felt better. Everything felt lighter. It felt like that's where I was supposed to be. And the further I got away from Baltimore and the closer into Delaware that I got, the more that feeling was embraced. And we're in a very funny little part of Delaware because I could throw a rock out my front door and hit Maryland. I'm 2 miles from Pennsylvania. I'm 13 miles from New Jersey. We're just in that little corner where there's 4 states within 5 minutes of each other. And so it really is this little imaginary line. But that Delaware corner of that imaginary line had a markedly different experience, a different feeling in my chest. I'm like, okay, I guess this is where we're supposed to be.
I know that exact feeling. I first went to Winterthur when I was like too young to remember going. Like, my mom said to me in like 5th or 6th grade, do you want to go back to Winterthur? And I was like, where? I've never been there. And she's like, yeah, you were. Like, she showed me pictures, like I was there. But we really went, like, I would say for the past like 15 years, I've gone every single year, even when I don't live in the United States. If I'm visiting, I will go. And it's exactly that. It's like this. I have synesthesia. So
yes.
It literally turns brown and yellow, which doesn't sound attractive, but it's like sepia tones when I'm driving through Kennett Square. Like there's this one house, I used to call it the pimple house when I was a child, because it has these like, it's a whitewashed home, but it has the original stones like randomly whitewashed around it. So when I was like a 11-year-old, I was like, ew, it's got pimples. Like that's the house where things start to turn. And it's like, I'm entering like that like that town in Big Fish where he can tell this isn't of this world. It's like that, but only positive. Like Delaware really is just out there in the best possible way. I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one who feels that way.
No, my synesthesia is more sound, taste, and color. So when it's one of the reasons
sound and color, and
it's one of the reasons that one of my friends, Brian, says Amy knows how people are supposed to smell because their name has a color and their smell matches that color. So like this person is supposed to smell like paper and sassafras and Virginia cedar because that smell has the same color as their name. Absolutely, right there with you.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, people have colors for me too. Like their letters individually will have a color, but when it's a name, it has a color, and people have their own color. Like I actually dated a guy with the same name as my brother for a while and genuinely did not realize they had the same name until I went to introduce him to my family. And my mom was like, that is disgusting. He's the same name as your brother. How did this even happen? And it just didn't occur to me because they were completely different colors, personalities, like they were just different colors. And that's the only way I could describe it.
Absolutely. It's funny because Winterthur is so close to Longwood. I mean, I think they're like 2 or 3 miles apart. Yeah. But that imaginary line from PA to Delaware, it feels like they're worlds apart, even though they're both in the ritzy areas of Pennsylvania and Delaware. They feel completely separate, and you could do both in one day, but it's just why would you want to?
That was what I asked for high school graduation, was a student membership to Winterthur. So I would go like throughout every summer when I was back at my parents' place in Pennsylvania. I would drive to Winterthur and read my book. Like I have like the best memories of books read there. Like it's just, and that's actually why I started my YouTube channel. Was I was like, all right, I'm not crazy. Like I felt something amazing in Harper's Ferry. I kept like West Virginia is not a place that people think of in these idyllic terms, but I do. Like it's one of the most spiritual places I've ever been. The Susquehanna Valley is just so rich with like history and culture. And that was before I discovered folk magic and the actual factual, Googleable, deep rooted, powers that be out there. So yeah, I could talk about spirit of place every day, all day.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember going to Longwood with my book bag and, studying for a criminal law final in the lawn at Longwood over by the cafe. And it's like, okay, it feels safe to me there. And as somebody with complex PTSD, safe is not a very tangible thing always. So finding somewhere where I know the spirit accepts me, the spirit of place, the land whites see me as a part of this ecosystem. And that feels really safe. Absolutely. When the people who are listening, please, if you have a place like that, even if it doesn't make sense to you, that is a very special and intangible thing that not everyone gets to experience.
Yeah. Cherish that and keep going back. I think I don't know, I'm neurodivergent, so I'm always thinking that maybe this is just me, but I think we are often told like, okay, don't overkill that song. Don't keep playing that song. Don't keep reading that book. You're going to ruin it for yourself. Don't keep going to that place. Same thing. You're going to ruin it for yourself. But I've never actually found that to be true. Occasionally with songs, I'll need a break for like a week or two, but places just never do that. I find that if a place is moving, it just gets more and more moving. There's more to uncover.
And there's more colors. There's always more colors.
Yes. it's just so timely that we talked so much about intuition. Like Leandra, I just realized this connects to what we were just talking about, how we are like connecting with this feminine was okay. So like several years ago, I started ghost hunting. Ever since I was a kid, I've had like really visceral experiences with ghosts and like spirits. And I didn't even know they were ghosts. I literally thought that that everyone saw them. Like that was me as the kid all the time. And then that lasted my whole life. Like it really never went away until like mid-college then I started teaching, and like I honestly just started dissociating so much I lost all that. And then it started coming back. And so I've been delving back into that part of myself. And like 2 years ago, a friend of mine who also was a paranormal investigator, but less intuitively, but very respectfully, not this weird, like exercise everything kind of thing. And she was like, I don't know, but do you do ghost hunting? Because I feel like you'd be very good at it. Like totally randomly just told me that. And so this has been in the back of my mind. In the past few weeks, I've been thinking about it again. And I've been like realizing there's this intersection coming of like intuition, and maybe that's this snake thing. Me and Leandra both have been having this snake thing.
It's all connected, maybe. I don't know. Still trying to figure out the white serpent.
Can I share something?
Yeah, share it.
Yes.
With the screens being what they are, I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Oh, I can see it. That is a ghost on Pea Patch Island, Fort Delaware.
Yes.
At the entrance of the bay. So there is a figure of a woman wearing an apron. Looks like she's coming out of a closed door in Fort Delaware. This was September 2005. I was part of an investigation group already at that point. But my some friends actually said, hey, let's go to Fort Delaware and do the ghost tour. It's September, so it won't be as mobbed as it will be later in October. So we go, and they split you into two groups. One group starts in the kitchen, one group starts in the basement, and you just sort of pass each other. And then you get back on the boat and you go back to shore. But so we're in the kitchen. We're very starting out for the evening. We go into the kitchen, and the tour is led by the head of the folklore department for University of Delaware. So he's telling you the stories of the different things that have happened on Pea Patch Island in Fort Delaware. It's a very small outpost that was originally for the Revolutionary War. They wanted to make sure that people weren't getting in, so it was a strategic point. And then later it was a hospital for contagious infectious diseases. So it's got a history.
Yeah.
So we get in the kitchen, and the Ed O'Conowitz is his name, is saying this is a cold spot. People bring their little ghost hunter equipment, and it's a few degrees colder in this one spot. Well, it's a living fort in that it's closed, but they use it for reenacting historical dress, cooking, all the different things that they do there. So this group of reenactors is sitting in the kitchen. They're doing a reenaction that day of different cooking styles for military, for the fort. It's just a group of women sitting around a table talking. They're in between groups of kids coming through, and so they're just sort of chilling. Well, the door that you saw in the picture opens, and a woman walks out wearing the same garb they are, goes over to the stove, takes the lid off the pot, gives the stew a stir, puts the lid back on, turns around, and walks out through a wall.
Nice.
Oh my God.
Like, oh, hey, I haven't seen you here. How you doing? Like, they're talking to her as a person. Everyone in that room saw her.
Yeah.
That's
and they
amazing.
thought she was a person right up until she walked through that wall. It's actually it's the right where you're looking at where you saw the photo.
Yeah.
Where it is now, today in 2022, that's a storage closet. But 200, 300 years ago, that was actually the hallway in between two separate rooms. They just walled it off and made it a closet. And the wall that she walked through was the door to the basement of the kitchen, where the root cellar would be for the storage of food.
Makes sense.
So she knew where she was going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had everyone take pictures of the cold spot at different times throughout the evening's tour. And so I took that picture in a brightly lit room. It's about as bright as Leandra's room there. There's cream walls. It's nice and bright. But the photo, everything is blood red.
Yeah, it's red. Interesting.
So it was just a regular point and shoot camera. And I had a couple people like, oh, well, you could do that with filters. I'm sure it's fake. But I had 30 people watch me take the photo, including the head of the folklore department for the University of Delaware.
Wow.
So I'm like, Ed, check this out. You can see in this little tiny 1-inch square on the back of my little point and shoot camera. And he said, oh my God. By the time we got back on the boat at the end of the evening, half of the other group had already heard about this. So I'm showing my camera around, but Ed liked it so much. He thought it was neat enough that he actually put it into his book, Civil War Ghosts of Fort Delaware.
Nice.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's amazing.
It's neat as hell.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I totally dig that stuff.
Yeah. Literally, like, I wrote a fiction book about a ghost in a home that a woman lives in, and she's a witch. So instead of trying to exorcise the demons, she's just like, let me talk to them. And she did, does protective circles of black salt and all this. And like, it's just still, even though I finished this book and I've been trying to publish it for like 6-8 months now, it's still just now occurring to me that maybe there is a connection with my personal life and ghosts again. Because there's always been a part of me that's like, oh, that's like the hocus pocus witchcraft. Like, because I've never even used tools. I've used pendulums and just gotten enough readings and communication to like pinpoint exactly like how many men died, how old they were. They were from Georgia. When I was in Gettysburg, I went up into Devil's Den at like sunset and like, like, I mean, I've had a lot of experiences. I even found like a hiker who they claimed they never found, but I went out with no information, and I was at Gettysburg, and the rocks, of course, were hot as hell because it was summer and it was sunny. And then all of a sudden, one patch of this rock, which should have been extremely hot, like the rest of this rock, was very cold. So I used my pendulum to read, and it was a woman who said that she was being chased and she fell and her leg broke and she doesn't know what's going on. And I, through yes or no questions, I got the year 1977, and I got a first name. I got Abigail, and she just kept coming back to like, it's okay. Like, someone will be here soon. Like, she really was stuck in those last like 30 seconds or so of her life. Yeah. And then when I looked it up, like, a girl named Abigail something or other died in 1977, they think, while hiking out on this trail, and they don't know what happened to her, and that there had been like a string of people that were, they don't know if they were intentionally murdering people or if they were just like asshole kids kind of situation, but like several hikers died that year in Gettysburg.
Wow.
Like,
I've never heard of that.
Crazy.
That's really cool. Crazy.
Yeah, like if you Google it, there was like a hiker stalker is what like I found on like, I was in like old newspaper archives, like figuring this out kind of thing.
That's nuts. Okay.
The more you delve into like the craft, the more you're like, this is applicable everywhere. I can help so many people in so many ways, like even dead ones.
And it's so important because we have this understanding. People have this image in their head that because we practice magic, because we interact with spirits that are not visible to the naked eye usually, that we're, woo and out there. Yeah. But a really good witch has a healthy amount of skepticism.
Oh yeah.
It's so important.
Oh yeah. Like nothing but skepticism sometimes.
Yeah. I always call myself the skeptical believer, because I'm going to try and disprove it first before I believe it.
Absolutely.
And yeah, my mentor taught me that one, she had a knack for like attracting the people. They're like, I'm seeing fairies, and here they're high as a kite, or, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It never ceases to amaze me in any aspect. Like, I've been doing this for years, but I'm like, wow, that's so cool. Like, I still like fangirl over it.
Those magic is real moments are worth their weight in gold.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I love it.
Yeah. Like when I was a teacher, that equivalent moment was like when a kid actually said, like, you really helped me learn. You know what I mean? It's like that high you get from like being acknowledged in the thing you're trying to do all the time.
Absolutely. It's amazing.
Wellness comes out November 1st. So,
okay. Oh, cool.
And we talk a lot about protection magic, which is available. So
right.
Yeah. I can't stop talking about that book. I recommend it to strangers.
I'll tell you what, I they sat on it for 4 months going, are we gonna do this thing? It took 4 months for them to decide they would let me keep chapter 6.
What?
Oh my gosh. The best chapter.
Right. Not only me, which I'm biased, but literally every person is like, that is the best chapter in the best book of the history of magic. Like, let's go. Because it's so practical. The part about
I literally had to put it down and think before I could keep reading. Like, it struck me.
And the number of people who were like, I turned the last page and then went back to the first page. Not small number. Like Good. My favorite tidbit from that was 72% of all new home construction uses quick set locks. So everybody learns to pick quick set locks.
Yeah.
If you want to be a little more secure in your domicile, don't use quick set locks.
Yeah, that's where I called my husband in and was like, "Come here, you need to read this book."
I will share something, and it is obviously your call whether you leave it in the podcast or not. I'm okay because I talked about it in the book. But to be able to write this book was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Like, each book demands a different part of you, a different piece of your soul to live in its little amber house. But I could not write a single word until I dealt with the end of chapter 6. That was one of the first things I wrote because I couldn't move past the writing of this book. Could not do it. I sat on this contract for a couple months, just paralyzed with fear, because here is this horrific, terrifying ordeal. And so I called my editor. I called Magick one day and said, "Look, I'm having a really hard time with this. Can we talk about it?" Yes. We're both night owls, so we can talk at 3 a.m.
Sheesh.
I love it. It's best.
That's good.
So I said, "Look, I feel like a fraud." And she's like, "What? Tell me what's going on." And I said, "I've had these horrifying and tragic and terrifying experiences, and I feel like a fraud because I'm here talking to people about protection magic when I've had this stuff happen." And she said, "My love, this is why we want you to write that book. Anybody can put together a book on protection magic. You have the knowledge and experience of your past to be able to illustrate these things and make this a book that someone can relate to rather than feeling they're being lectured at." Yeah. That's what people want. They need that connection with you as a person as well as to your story. And I said, "Okay." We get off the phone and I realize I've got to make peace with this or I'm not going to be able to write one word. And so I go down to the Brooming Horn. It's a heathen-owned meadery here in Delaware. It's beautiful and magical, and they ship to 42 states.
So cool.
They do ship to Pennsylvania. And so I grab a glass of their Shirley Temple mead. It was a maraschino cherries and lemon and just a hint of ginger. Beautiful. And I had a glass of mead and I sat with it and I sat with myself and I said, "Okay." And I go about a half an hour down Route 1 to Bethany Beach. Lovely little community beach there. There's probably 5 little shops clustered around there. It's a very, very small beach, but it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. That's one of my favorites.
And so I made my way to the edge of the blustery day where the water was, and it's warm inside, but it's still blustery enough to be cool. So it's probably like October or September. And I sat down and I had to think and talk. And there's a content warning for this for probably, I would skip ahead like 15 or 30 seconds. I had a stalker who not only threatened to kidnap, rape, and murder me, but had a plan to execute it, had shown up at my second job that he shouldn't have known I had, and attempted to steal me. And he told me to my face that he plans to do this, and he was going to leave my body on Bethany Beach for some mom with a kid to find. Ooh. Like, just a horrible, horrible thing that was happening. And so I knew I couldn't make peace with that person. Some things are just not forgivable. Some things are not going to be, but that's not the beach's fault. I had spent so much time. I had never been to Bethany at that point when this all went down. And so I certainly wasn't going then, but it's not the beach's fault. So I went down to the water's edge. I picked up some stones along the way, and it's deserted because it's it's still chilly. It's cold enough. No one's going in the water.
Yeah.
And so I have this talk with the beach as a personification. And it's like, I know this isn't your fault. It's not my fault, and it's not your fault. This is the fault of the person who did this. And I had to make peace with that to be able to write even one word of Blackthorn's protection magic.
Makes sense.
Because it was so traumatic. There was a wall in front of me. Mm-hmm. And you have to figure out, are you willing to bang your head against the wall and hope that it crumbles, or to figure out a way around that?
And deal with it, yeah. Mm.
So you have to get to the other side. So I'm hurling rocks into the ocean and pouring all this out of my soul. But I'll tell you what, I was able to leave a big part of that there at the beach, where somebody bigger than me can handle this.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I was able to go home and write.
Good. Excellent.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing that. And it's so visceral in the chapter, the way you describe what you went through, but then more importantly, what you did about it. And I think that's what's so empowering about protection magic, is that it is a book to empower.
Yes.
I had a hard time actually figuring what parts to leave in and what parts to leave out, because there's pieces that I could not say out loud that occurred during this horrifying period. And I had to make that be okay. I had to make it make sense. So there's piecemeal, but there had to be some things that I kept for myself, because I knew, being an author for a few years now, and this will be my 5th book when it comes out in November. This book is, I'm going to use protection magic as an example, but protection magic goes out into the world the day it's published. It's no longer my book. This is now the people's book. So their feelings, their thoughts, their experiences, their life gets to be enmeshed in these pages. It's not about me anymore, because they have their own experiences, and it doesn't matter what I meant or what I felt or what I thought. It means how that affects the person who's reading it. And so I knew at some point, some of the harder pieces and some of the bloodier pieces, someone was going to read that and need to hear that it's not their fault, but also that if I put those pieces in, someone was going to come up to me at a conference and say, let's talk about the most horrifying thing you've ever dealt with, in the hallway, over 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's important because their piece is also valid and important and needed. And it's beautiful that they feel comfortable sharing that with you. Mm-hmm. But also at the same time, in the middle of a conference, in the hallway, as you're passing by someone, can be a little bit more triggering and upsetting. So this was the very fine line that I had to walk to make sure that people understood that it's never your fault. It's the fault of the perpetrator of the incident.
Yep.
But also that you're not alone. You're never alone.
Excellent. Yeah. I think more people need to hear that.
Yes.
Just letting that sink in, man.
I appreciate you both. Seriously. That's not something that's easy to talk to or easy to hear.
Yeah. Well, and my focus is community. And I think when we hold things back because of shame or blame or anything like that, we're stunting our ability to connect with each other.
Yes.
So when we can come together and talk candidly and openly and honestly about what has happened to us and how we deal with it and how we can deal with it moving forward, teaching others our knowledge and our wisdom, that's where community grows the strongest roots, because we understand each other.
Yes, because when I have a black belt and I've been teaching forever, right? I'm a competition shooter. Like I do all the things. Like I did everything. I looked at the officer who came to take my statement after the initial horrible thing. And I said, look, I did everything right. I did all the things they tell women to do from the time you were born You know, I teach self-defense. I have a concealed carry license. Like, I did everything right. Why is this happening to me? And people need.
Yeah.
There's this idea that we shame ourselves because it shouldn't have happened because X.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if I am a black belt who he knew I was a competition shooter, I knew how to do all the things. He knew that I knew what I was doing and how to handle myself.
Yeah.
There's this idea that, well, if I do everything right and this still happens, then what did I do that was wrong? And we try and find the kernel of fault because that means that it's something we can avoid happening again.
Yeah.
If we can find the thing I did wrong, I can prevent this from happening again.
Right.
And it's not our job to prevent that from happening. Mm-hmm. It's our job to survive and then still thrive.
Yes.
So in asking the officer who responded, he looked at me and said, well, he's too arrogant for this to be suicide by cop. He doesn't want to die. He wants the thrill of the chase.
Yeah.
And you're not just a target. This is sexually gratifying to him to have the hunt and know that someone might be better than he is. And it's like, okay, it actually made that a little bit easier to deal with because to think of this as it happened because I was strong enough rather than this is something that happened to me.
Yeah.
And that was just my truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes sense. And it goes deeper into the collective shadow of how men are programmed to think about their position and their position over, and how we are programmed to believe that we are the ones automatically at fault, that it's our fault somehow that we get raped, or our fault that we get beat, or our fault that we have a stalker.
Yes.
Because somehow we chose that, right?
And the number of people who said something along the lines of, well, what did you do to deserve that? Like,
right.
It's so messed up. It's so messed up that this is things that people not only thought, but said out loud with their mouth.
Yeah. But they believe it. They believe it.
They really do.
And
because these are things that happen to other people.
Right.
Capital O, capital P, other people.
Other people. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Because if it happens to someone that we love and we care about, it could happen to us.
Right.
If it only happens to those people, whoever the other is in this scenario.
People who deserved it somehow. Yeah.
Right. Because our society tells people, if you're a good person, bad things won't happen to you. Right. And that is so damaging because that's not how that works at all.
No, it is not how it works.
Yeah. And it's unbelievable how many people will walk away from you after your trauma simply to maintain that facade in their brain.
Yes.
That false reality. Like they can't face that even happened. They'll use euphemisms if you try to talk about it to shut you down.
Yep.
They project. Yeah. All of that.
And the other part is that unshakable faith in the justice system that has them saying, okay, well, obviously a bad thing happened to him. You went to the police. Less than 1% of people who commit sexual assault actually see any jail time, much less enough to fit the crime.
Yeah, there's no accountability.
I went, I did everything right. I went and I told the police what happened, and I figured the police will make it better. I was in college to go in. I was going to go into the FBI. I was going to do this. I was going to do that. I was going to make a difference.
Yeah.
And so in Delaware, him telling me he's going to kidnap, rape, and murder me, and telling me his plan to do such, how he planned on carrying this out, was considered a misdemeanor terroristic threatening. So it's my word against yours. We'll go fight it out in court. Because it was a misdemeanor in the state of Delaware, that meant that I had to go before a judge to get an arrest warrant issued, just like if I was a police officer. So I had to get the form, I had to fill it out, I had to write down what happened, I had to explain everything to a judge, got my piece of paper, and they say, okay, now go in that room. Okay, so I go in that room, and there's a judge sitting at the bench, and I had to go in front of him the same way a litany of police officers have to do to prove their warrant to have someone arrested.
It's insane.
So I'm there in my security uniform because obviously this happened at work. the first awful part. And so I had to go, and I sit in the very back. There's like 2 rows of chairs, and there's an officer pleading his case for the arrest warrant. That guy gets his thing, he signs off, and he goes out the door. And the judge looks down from the bench at me going, okay, I don't know you. Let's see what's up. And I say, I can't even speak. I'm so traumatized at this point. And I'm like, I need a warrant. And they told me to come here. He says, come on out, come on. He sees I'm in a security uniform. I'm like, look, I'm a criminal law student, so at least I know what's happening, but I don't know what's happening. And it turned out that the sweetest judge on planet Earth is a professor of the other local college that teaches law enforcement classes. So he treated it like a lesson. He brought me up to the bench. He said, this is what you did, and this is what he did, and this is where you tell me what's going on, and this is how you fill that out, and everything's fine. We're going to make sure that you get taken care of. It's Friday at like 5:00. So we might find him coming home, or we might not find him until over the weekend. Right. But we're going to do this, and it'll be okay. Bless this man.
Yeah.
They didn't find him until Sunday morning when he came home. But he was out 15 minutes later. Oh, his mom has money. I don't know if his mother's still alive. Had been bailing him out of things like this for years. He did 12 years for assaulting a child. Like, it's hard enough to get 1 year. Jesus. So I had to wait until April to find out the fate of whatever's going to happen. So from Black Friday to the middle of April, I had to sit and wait and twiddle my thumbs and find out if this guy was going to go to jail. He admitted this to a judge. Everything. He was proud of himself. Tell everything to a judge. Didn't try and hide it at all. Here's the things. I had to be there, but they left me in the separate witness chamber, so I didn't actually have to be in the courtroom with him. I was in the same room for the waiting before the jury part.
Gotcha.
Sitting on the next bench 5 feet away. That was fun. But even with him admitting this, he didn't fight it. His lawyer didn't fight it. There was no fighting. They're just like, oh yeah, this is what happened. His mom bought him a nice new suit.
It just verifies how integrated this mindset is into our culture. Like, he didn't even care. Did not care. It didn't matter to him because somebody was going to sympathize with him. Somebody was going to back him up. And his mother, as much as I love my own son, like, I don't see how a mother can look at her son and say, oh, it's okay, I'll just keep bailing you out. You're a horrible person, but I'm going to keep bailing you out. Like, I understand a mother's love, but there's a point where you have to be accountable for what you're allowing to happen.
You got a year probation.
Yeah.
A year probation.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
Thanks for that.
Angry. Right?
Yes, absolutely. He's out living his life, and I have to live with this for the rest of mine.
Right. I'm wondering if he's ever going to come back at you for some stupid,
and he did
wild hair up his ass. Yeah.
That 1 year probation, the day after that 1 year probation was over, he got a job at my grocery store. Just to prove that he could.
Yep. Amazing. Amazingly ridiculous.
Yep. So much happier in this job.
Yeah. Seriously.
Well, we're glad that you're well and good, and that's history and hopefully stays history.
Yeah, and that you found the strength to share this with all the readers of Protection Magic.
Well,
and that you are doing this job instead.
Yes.
Because you're
yes.
You're doing so much more good than that asshole is ever going to do bad.
Right. Well, and think about how many women are out there who never went that far, who never got their perpetrator into a judge's chamber because they never knew what to do. They didn't know what they could do. They were just told by the cops and pacified and dismissed.
Yes.
How many people get dismissed on these things and they're just forced to live with that?
The person in question, when I finally reported him to my boss so that he could report it to his boss, he calls my boss, Bob, called the head of the kitchen downstairs to talk about this.
Yeah.
And he says, are you willing to make a formal complaint, like a written complaint? Yes, that's why I'm here. Please, let's do that. He had been doing this to women for years and years, but every time, he was putting his phone number in women's lunches and scrolling it on the top of their lunchbox as he's making their food. And it happens over and over and over again. And every single person who complained said, "Oh, I don't want to get him in trouble. I just want him to leave me alone."
Jesus Christ.
So according to his boss, like something like 9 women had come forward to complain about him, but none of them would go on record. So I will never, ever blame a victim. That's not what I'm doing.
No.
But it was hurtful to see that.
Yeah.
I wasn't the only one that's experienced, and no one felt empowered. Delaware's an at-will state. They could have fired him.
Yeah.
They wanted to pin it on somebody. Well, fine. Then you're going to pin it on me because he needs to not be here anymore.
Right. And then, yeah. And I'm so disgusted with our programming of women.
Yes.
Of like, oh, don't ruin the man's life or the boy's life because he misbehaved. Well, why aren't we teaching them not to misbehave? Why are we not teaching them that this behavior is unacceptable? So maybe it's a process of having to ruin, quote unquote, ruin their life, which is ridiculous to even say. Like, they're doing the bad deed. They're ruining their own life. Like, why is it pinned on us as being the ones who are instigating the ruining?
Yeah, it's our fault. No,
it's not our fault. It's not. Nope. And anybody who hears this, it is not your fault.
Ever.
You know, stop letting that message sink in. And I know it's hard. It's such a collective shadow that we have to break free from, but it starts individually. You have to work on that internally and decide that it's no longer a truth. It's no longer something that you have to embody and live by.
You can put it down.
Yeah, put it down.
I'll write you a note. Like I wrote the book. I
there you
literally
go.
wrote the book on protection magic. I will write you a note.
There. Yeah, right here. You have a permission slip. Here, take it. Go bury it in the sand. Excellent.
Because the sand can take it a lot better than we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Compost that out. Mm-hmm.
Compost is the best.
Yes, it is. Transmutation, man. Let's do it.
I adore both of you so much for allowing me the space to talk about this.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm glad to have you here.
Absolutely.
There are interviews I've done that would not have been appropriate or welcome to talk about these things.
We
so I
talk
appreciate
about
it.
a lot of inappropriate things.
Yay!
Yeah. Yep. This is a safe space, and actually, by the time this interview comes out, the episode that we recorded just after the Roe v. Wade repeal will be out. So
they'll link up. Yeah.
Shit got feisty.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think it's time for women to get feisty. I think it's time for witches to get feisty.
Yeah.
You know, when I first started my path, I was, dabbling and trying to figure out different paths. And I found the reclaiming group early on. And, Starhawk was one of my, idols. I loved her and I still do. I think she's amazing. And when I got into it, like they've always been really political protests and, running for office, that sort of thing. I was just not ready for it. I was like, oh my God, this is scary. Like putting myself out there and making myself visible and potentially going to jail, and even hearing about Starhawk about how like she was 15 years old going to jail for handing out balloons at a protest, these things, it terrified me. I had kids, I had a family, I had a life. I couldn't be exposed like that. But now that I'm coming back to it, I'm like, damn straight, like sign me up. Like, how do I get in on this?
Yeah. I mean, in college, back when the world had hope in 2015, I canvassed for Bernie Sanders and I went in Lancaster, PA. Okay. So this is like, okay, so there's Bible-y folks, but at the same time, like pretty safe place to have a little gathering or to knock on a door, especially back in 2015. I know it's changed a lot since then.
It has, yeah.
But yeah, so I was doing this and everyone in my family, random classmates, they were all telling me like, I just wouldn't I'm going to vote for Bernie. I'm going to vote for him, but I just don't really think you should like be putting yourself out there like that. And I'm like, what do you mean out there? I'm talking to old people. This is Lancaster.
Nice.
And half the time you're on the phone or you're showing up in front of like a very safe building that is designated every Friday for 2 hours to be the place where you talk to the public and have like a meeting. And you know what I mean? Like not even a protest, like a meeting, literally an outdoor meeting. Like it was so safe. I never once felt endangered. Like, and people aren't even willing to step up in that way, much less a protest, At the height of COVID, before things had vaccines and everything, I didn't want to physically go to the protests
Yeah.
So I lived in Baltimore, so there were plenty going on. So I would bring water and be masked up and just hand it out. So that way I wasn't in the crowd, but I was still like active. And I think that's what witches need to remember, is that we are the active ones. Like,
yes,
a lot of us don't even feel comfortable calling this a religion, because religion, faith, that sounds passive. That sounds like something that's just happening outside of us. And, sure, we have our attention at it, but that's, when we have time. Like, no, like witches are active. We make things happen. Magic is so active.
Yeah.
And we need to show up that way all the time. It's like taking the magical and putting it in our mundane, but also recognizing that the mundane is the most important place to have the magic.
It's all energy.
Like,
yeah.
This empowerment needs to happen.
Yes.
Definitely. I love these conversations. It's good.
Me too. Best job in the world.
I'm so done with passive conversation and shallow conversation. I want people in my circle who are going to stimulate me, who are going to challenge me to think and grow and see things differently. Well, thank you very much. And, I hope we can do this again. I hope we can stay connected and talk to each other.
That needs to be a thing.
Promote each other.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, whatever, like community. I'm really aching for community. I'm trying to build that. So.
Oh, me too. And I think I'm the only person comfortable calling himself a witch in this entire country.
Probably.
So
yeah, if it's illegal, definitely.
Yeah. Like
awesome.
If I move back to America, this is going to be why.
Yeah. Oh, that's so sad, but.
Thank God for Zoom. Thank the goddess for Zoom.
Nice.
Would have been a very different pandemic without it.
It would have been. It would have been weird. I don't know. I think we've gotten so accustomed to it now.
And lonely.
Yeah.
Because this being able to, it's not just hearing someone's voice, but face, voice, the entirety of our communication.
Yeah. And I hate sitting on the phone.
It's more real. And I've noticed that like in my memories of Zoom calls, the longer ago it was, like it really does feel more like we were hanging out. Whereas like a phone call, I'll be like, I think they texted me something. Oh wait, no, it was a phone call. You know what I mean? Like that's its own sphere.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I do think Zoom calls are hanging out. Like, tell listeners how they can find you.
The first 30 pages or so of each one of my books is available free to download at amyblackthorn.com. It'll talk about how to get in touch with me if you'd like to book a reading, if you'd like to have me come and speak at your shop, at your event, if you're a conference. Those details are amyblackthorn.com. If you want to check out my tea selections, there's a tarot category, there's different gods and spirits, there's planetary astrology sections. Each one has their own little mysteries and nooks and crannies. You can check those out at blackthornsbotanicals.com. And there's always the fun over on TikTok. You can find me at Amy Blackthorn Author with all little underscores in between. The same for Instagram and a bunch of other places. You can find me at my Facebook page, Amy Blackthorn Author. Over on TikTok, every so often we're playing the herbal dating game. So I'll let you know what this plant does magically, and you'll let me know what plant you think it is and whether or not you can vibe with that different plant. It's a lot of fun, and it's more relaxed over there.
Thanks for being here.
I had so much fun.
Thank you. Yeah, this was great. I really enjoyed it. Merry meet,
merry part, and merry meet again.
Thank you for joining us on the Magick Kitchen Podcast. Please visit my website, leandrawitchwood.com, for news, information, and more episodes.
I'm Elyse Welles, and I can be found at Seeking Numina on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and seekingnumina.com. That's Seeking, Numina.